Hi everyone, to another episode of DRIVA Deep Dive. Today we are sitting down for an honest conversation with Martin Treder, a seasoned data leader and author of the Chief Data Officer Management Handbook. With over 25 years of experience at organizations like DHL, TNT and FedEx, and now as the head of MDM, Governance and Architecture at Boehringer Ingelheim, Martin brings a wealth of knowledge and some unfiltered truth about the role of the Chief Data Officer. We dive into what it really means to be a CDO today, the challenges, the misconceptions, and why delivering measurable value can feel like an uphill battle. Martin shares practical insights on navigating organizational resistance, striking the balance between governance and innovation, and making a real impact in the C-suite. Here's what you will hear. The CDO reality check, what it's really like leading data in an organization, data strategy and monetization, how to turn data into value that business actually notices, and governance models that work, centralized, federated, decentralized, what's best and why. What's next for the CDO, how AI and automation are shaping the future of the role will also be covered. So, if you ever have wondered what it takes to succeed as a CDO or just being curious about the real-world challenges of data leadership, this episode is for you. Don't miss out this candid and insightful conversation we have with Martin. Enjoy it. So, welcome everyone to today's podcast episode. I have the pleasure to have today Martin Treder with us. Martin, it's great to have you here with us, and I appreciate very much the effort that you took to come over to Hamburg during the high season of the end of the year. So yeah, great to have you here. And Martin, do you know that we, at each of the episodes that we start, I give a fun fact about a river close to the guest's city, where he is either born or is living or something, yeah?
Okay.
So you told me that you are born somewhere between Düsseldorf, Wuppertal and Essen. And the closest river, or one of the most significant rivers in that region, is the Ruhr River.
Yeah, okay, yeah, it's one of the rivers. Mhm.
Yeah, so there's also the Rhine. But
And the Wupper, and then you have all three cities covered.
okay, yeah, exactly,
Okay.
yeah. So, but I took the Ruhr River, and let's see if you know this fun fact about the Ruhr River. Due to the industrialization of the region, the Ruhr River was highly polluted. Yeah, so due to coal industry and so on. So no one could barely drink from it, so it was highly toxic. Yeah, and now they have put so much effort into the Ruhr River that it is completely clean, and I think the fourth largest water source of Germany, and more than 4 million people are basically depending on the Ruhr River clean water for their existing. Did you know that?
Didn't know the precise fact, but that it has been cleaned significantly, and that now in the Baldener See, which is part of the Ruhr River, you have fantastic holiday possibilities. So should you ever come close to Essen, visit Baldener See.
Okay, nice. So it's nice for swimming? Okay, great.
Sailing and
Oh, okay.
everything, yeah.
Nice, good, great to know. So yeah, I thought this is a good fun fact because it talks about cleansing procedures and making something vital for existing sustainably good, or to have it in a high quality. And that leads me to basically a little bit to you and your activities in data management, especially master data management and architecture, because you have to deal also very much with cleaning data to have good data quality. Yeah. So that was the fun fact, and that I wanted to share with you. And now coming more about you. Yeah. So Martin, you are the head of master data management, governance and architecture at Boehringer Ingelheim, but you have a quite impressive vita, I would say. I think 25 years of experience.
Sort of, yeah.
Yeah, sort of. And in huge corporations, especially logistics, TNT, FedEx, DHL, yeah, and then you shifted to pharmaceutical. Yeah. So on top of that, you were or are the author of 2 books. Yeah. The Chief Data Officer Management Handbook and the Becoming a Data-Driven Organization book. Yeah. So you have, I would say, quite depth experience and knowledge when it comes to data management. And yeah, this makes you perfect for us to talk about different topics that we will cover today. But yeah, you started, but what is also kind of interesting is you are actually a mathematician.
Yes, I am, yeah. Okay. So I studied everything that you need to do artificial intelligence without ever having heard of artificial intelligence. It's typical for mathematicians. We do things without a direct purpose. We do things that we hope future generations might be able to use. The computer was invented 300 years before people were physically able to build computers, and we made linear algebra and analytics and everything far before somebody said, oh, that's a great idea, we can use it to do artificial intelligence.
Yes, I fully agree with you, and I think it must have shaped also your perspective on the topic very much. Yeah, so and how to approach it. So would you say that it is, now you mentioned already AI, but beyond AI, did it have an impact on your career path, let's say?
It shaped my entire way of thinking.
Okay.
It's just this rational thinking, this optimizing based on facts and combining weighted parameters to optimize something. I've had operations research as my main topic, and then applied statistics. And all of that is really about using facts and methods. On the other side, I learned in statistics far more about how people misuse statistics than about F distribution and chi-square distribution and everything. I've forgotten many things that are about technical and formulas and everything, but I kept the way of thinking. And this is with me until today.
Great. So the analytical mindset and being kind of rational in deciding which path to go, this is something that has shaped your career path. Okay. And is it also visible? I mean, you said it shaped your entire career path, but also privately, is it something that you would say that it's also something significant that you get to hear from about?
Being rational about everything is the easiest way to annoy my wife.
Okay. Okay.
Right? And that's what I learned. It's just not, the entire life is not just about thinking like this and logic. You need to mix it very well with empathy and things like that. Otherwise, it simply doesn't work.
Yeah, that's a good line, to mix it with empathy. I think that is something also that you have definitely gained throughout your career. And I said it, you were DHL, TNT, FedEx, and DPD as well. And I think, was it DPD where you kind of shifted towards data management?
At DPD, I started as a software developer.
Yes, IT, yeah, I read it, yeah.
And actually, one of the things that I did with 2 colleagues in the evenings, we created a master data system without knowing that it was a master data system. I've learned that many, many years later. So we said, can't we do that in a bit more structured way? And then, 2 seasoned AS400 programmers who sat with me, and then we built, something about the locations and their attributes and everything, and make it systematically available to all systems. And that is one of the legacy that I left with DPD. But I think I have learned more than DPD has gained.
Okay. Okay. So what was it that you would say that you specifically have learned during that time?
First of all, that you cannot systematically use information that is described in plain text. Yeah. If you want to be sure that you interpret it correctly, you have to put it into a structure that computer systems can interpret. Mm-hmm. And this is something that I've seen since. People think in, writing down documents, putting things in sentences, and then you have a 15-page document, and then the computer should behave accordingly. How do you tell the computer? And then people think of hard coding and, for the specific case and everything. And I say, no, do it in a configurable way that it behaves differently if you just change the data. You don't need to change the software. And that's the first time I did that was back then at DPD in the 1990s.
Brilliant. Okay, so you brought in the different perspective on data or data insights in a way, yeah, and that the process or the application can remain the same, but the data needs to be adjusted for the specific purpose then.
And even further beyond, we had I think 50 different DPD depots in Germany back then. Each of which has its own software to scan packages. And I said, okay, why is that? Yeah, because they work differently, for good reasons, by the way. And I said, that doesn't justify the creation of 50 different systems, because then if you fundamentally change something, you have to fundamentally change it in 50 systems, which is a huge effort. So let's see whether we can put this into one system and steer it through configuration. Yeah, and then it was one piece of this. Yeah, I cannot even tell you. It was 64 kilobyte memory that we had to get all of that in, and it was already hard with tailor-made solutions. But with configuration, there was a specific challenge. I enjoyed it very much back then.
Yeah, I can see it in your eyes when you're talking about it. There's some nostalgia in it, so it sounds kind of like really hands-on. Putting up the sleeves and yeah.
This is how we worked back then, right?
Yeah.
Imagine today you write a business requirement statement and then hand it over to IT, or even if you do it in an agile way, you have the business folks, you have the IT folks. I was both, right? I was writing software. One of the first laptops back then, 10.5 kilograms. I carried it with me into a depot, the main hubs that operate at night. We came there 10 p.m., tested, sent the packages around, tested again, and whatever we found, we updated the software at the location and left it with an updated software instead of three releases per year or anything. No, we just came, changed, left. Sometimes it was a bit of a challenge, right? If you just left and then you got a call, come back, it just doesn't work anymore. But in general, this is how we developed software directly together with the depot manager and the shift manager, who just looked at it and said, can't we do a bit of this? And, dynamic scales and volume measuring and everything. And you could never have done that perfectly well in an ivory tower, in an office on the 15th floor. But directly where the music plays, that was a big fun part of it.
Yeah, I believe that. And I think it also allows you, when you speak now to people who are more, let's say, on a tactical level or more on an operational level, you can relate to them. You can share like maybe some common experience with them. Yeah, you went through the same pain maybe in a certain degree, yeah? And that makes you a little bit more, or definitely more trustworthy towards them, because you know the pitfalls, yeah? And it's not like that someone, as you said, comes from the ivory tower and is now saying like left now and not more right, yeah? Would you agree?
Yeah, to a certain degree. Of course, today it's so much distance between back then. It's a different industry and everything. So if I told people, you have to be able to do it because I was able, that wouldn't work. Right? I really have to just argument differently today.
Yeah. Okay. But do you have the impression that now, because what you described, having like more smaller teams working in a, let's say, more collaborative, interdisciplinary approach is something that we are moving towards again, yeah? Is that something where you say we go back to?
It is actually, right? People say, oh, we make a big progress from waterfall to agile. Yeah. Well, it's coming back to agile. Yeah. People first systematized everything and said, oh, we can move the development to cheap labor countries and then send the requirements over and then get the results back, which was to save money. At the same time, people lost this flexibility and the direct feedback. The developer would have said, oh, that doesn't make sense. But he couldn't directly say, hey, that doesn't make sense. What should we do instead? He had to follow, send the result back and let the requester find out that it doesn't make sense, which then cost a lot of money and time. And now people have then developed this agile approach to actually get this feedback and the agility back into the software development.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting how, you know, like it's like in fashion when they say like, oh, what you were wearing in the 80s is coming back in 2000s or something. It seems like in IT management or management, it's kind of the same, yeah?
In that respect, definitely, yeah.
Interesting. And I mean, I mentioned it already, you have been working for some huge corporations in the logistic industry, yeah? And you have seen, I think, several different management or styles and company culture and so on. Would you say that within the logistic industry, there was still a kind of pattern to identify or some similarities? Or is it really the case that no, every company was at the end for itself?
From a management perspective, all companies work totally differently. Back then, DHL was very much Asia-Pacific driven. Deutsche Post was, you know, German civil servants. Interesting when they came together. There was a fantastic, clash of cultures. TNT was a blunt Dutch company. If you meant A, you said A. And FedEx was an American company, right, with this American style where you were very strict, but at the same time, you didn't say things in a blunt way. And so it's all different characters, different cultures, but each of these companies worked very well in their main business.
And then the mathematician came, who is very rational and is saying like, yeah, order and analytical way. And then, but you adapted to these different cultures, right?
I had to, you know, and it started at DPD where, you know, I said, you know, this is right, so we have to go that direction. And then a good colleague told me, sometimes it is easier to take a slight detour rather than going with the head through the wall. You know, from a mathematical perspective, the shortest connection between A and B is a line. But if there's a wall in between, it's easier and better to go around the wall. True. And I had to learn that the hard way, and I benefited from that in my subsequent jobs.
Okay, interesting. So can you give us a little bit more maybe explanation of what you mean with the hard way? Because I would say working for such a long time in the industry and being exposed to all these different cultures, as you said, like management styles and so on, it must have again shaped your way of managing and leading a topic like data management in a significant way. So, and what was the hard path that you were facing?
Yeah, if you determine that from 2 or 3 options, one option is by far the best. Your boss says, no, take one of the other options. And then you say, oh, I'm right, he's wrong. It's best for the company if we do it the right way. And you do it differently from what your boss had asked you to do, has turned out to be a bad idea. That was very early in my career. And I said, being right is not sufficient. You need to get the support of the relevant people.
Okay. Wow.
I made that error only once.
Okay, but that's pure wisdom what you're sharing with us, because if I compare myself, and I look now into the younger generation, which is very much about like sharing their opinion and sticking to it, it is a different perspective because you were willingly, with open eyes, accepting that it goes probably the wrong path, and you were accepting then the U-turn or the circle that you have to do at the end to get the people on board though.
I never accept wrong targets. I accept temporarily moving into the wrong direction. Eventually, I want to end up where I intended to go.
Okay, but you anticipated somehow that it will come back to...
yeah, in many cases it does.
Okay, but that's, but at the end, as I mean, I say it in my words now, you're kind of highlighting that it is not a sprint. It is if we always say it's a journey and it takes time, and having the people on board is rather more important than saying, hey, this is basically the right thing to do.
You can't do the right thing against people. You need the right target and the people support.
Yeah. At FedEx, you introduced the concept of data as an asset.
I worked hard to get there because data was not a topic. At FedEx, data was one of the many things that IT was responsible to provide. IT was far more than information technology, or is still at FedEx. IT is an all-around service provider that, of course, includes everything around data without actually necessarily having this business-driven view on data. Yeah, if you give data to an IT organization, the risk is very high that this IT organization takes it from a technocratic approach. And this is not sustainable.
Yeah. Yeah, but I would come up with the hypothesis that when you kind of shape the idea of data has value and data is a business asset, people must have looked at him when we're thinking like, what is he talking about? Yeah. It must have been a kind of new thought that you were introducing the management or the company to.
Yeah, well, it was not really a new thought, unfortunately, because we've had that thought before, and that was the so-called .com bubble, where company got bust because they put all virtual things like data onto their balance sheet, and data evaporates easily if you don't do the right thing with it. So people had a high theoretical value, and then just went bankrupt because they didn't translate it in anything. So if they had collected trucks, they could at least have sold the trucks eventually. But as they only had data that nobody else could use back then, they all disappeared. And that's what people remember. That's why it was so hard, and is still hard, to get data on the balance sheet. You have official ways of getting intangible assets on the balance sheet. Yeah? International Accounting Standard 48 or something says intangible assets, and it's like patents and things like that. And I've always said, consider data an intangible asset. And it has so many similarities with other assets in that you have to maintain it to keep it in good shape. You can sell it, you can buy it. Not having it prevents you from doing certain things, which adds to the business case and so on. And it has a couple of additional values on top. You can use the same asset in 5 locations at the same time. It doesn't get worse if you use it, right? Hardware degrades or buildings. Data doesn't. You can move it from one end of the earth to the other in milliseconds, which is hard for other assets. So it qualifies even more than the traditional assets to be put on a balance sheet.
I must say, these thoughts that you are having, I think that still people in different companies and industries still have problems to understand that and to digest that. Yeah. So it's very, for me, significant that you had this idea already during your time at FedEx. Yeah. And kind of shaped also in that sense the path of the company when it comes to data and reusing data. As you said, it's not decreasing on value, but rather it is actually increasing, because the more stakeholders are dealing with it, you try more and more to improve the quality of the data. So it's really something outstanding for me, because as I said, I see many companies who still have problems to understand the logic behind this concept. So you were at logistics for a very long time of your career, and then you shifted to Boehringer Ingelheim, which is a pharma or healthcare company. And what was the motivation to make such a hard shift towards that company or that industry?
that wasn't my first purpose. It just happened because a headhunter called me. But thank goodness, being conscious of the fact that I have always been working in one industry, and that could make me, narrow focused. I started talking to other people from other industries about data management. I attended data conferences, not to listen to the speaker or to speak myself, which I've done very often, but for the coffee talks in between and the evening dinners, where you just got these informal talks, where you learned about experience of other people's. You didn't only hear the success stories, but also what failed and why it failed. And that gave me a better idea of what do all of these industries have in common with regards to data, which I would quantify as 80%, and what is specific to each of the industries.
That was actually my next question. Yeah. So you said it like roughly 80% is something where you can say is a kind of common theme or capabilities in a sense. Yeah. Could you highlight, for example, what you have in mind when you say that?
Every company works with customers. Every company works with products. Every company has to forecast the future based on the past and based on external parameters. And all these things are so generic, they are not specific to a certain industry. Yeah.
So you say it so easily, but it is so simple as you said it. And I think it's again true. I always say, like, if you want to play football, you need 11 players on this side, 11 players on that side, a ball and 2 goals, and a few little rules. Yeah. So, and then you can play. Yeah? And it's the same as with data management. You have some common rules, you have some common players, some common procedures, interactions, and so on. They will come. They will be there for sure. It's then like this tweaking, making it more customized to then the specific philosophy or culture or target that you have. But yeah, I can really relate to what you're saying. Yeah. So, as I said in the introduction, you were not only engaged in these several companies and building up your experience and working on the ground, you also found some time to write books.
Yes, I did. Yeah.
First of all, the question: what was motivating you to write?
Actually, I had never planned to write a book. I had always intended to write things down in order not to forget them. I have such a bad memory. If you tell me something and I don't write it down, the risk that I've forgotten it tomorrow is very high. So I've written everything down. I've written quotes from people down and examples from companies and everything. And I reached the point where I said, if I just put this in a structure, turn it into a story, it could fill a book and it could be of interest for people. And I tried.
Yeah, and you not only tried, I would say you were quite successful in it. I mean, at least I enjoyed your book, the CDO Management Handbook. I think it gives a lot of good insights and practical advices of how to deal with certain scenarios and what is expected from a CDO, but in general from a data management unit. Yeah? And before we talk a little bit more about the CDO, I would like to look into your other book, Becoming a Data-Driven Organization, because there you highlight quite strongly the cultural transformation that is needed. So, I mean, you said it in a way already that culture is very important, but could you elaborate a little bit more on it and say, like, why this is such a big challenge and why it is, like, although it is so obvious, companies are having their difficulty to adapt?
Data doesn't have a tradition. Everybody knows what a chief finance officer does. Everybody knows what a chief information officer does. It changes, of course, over time, but the idea is pretty clear at any point of time. Chief data officer is something new. And most CEOs cannot really grasp it. It's too theoretical for them, right? And that's basically the history of my books. I started writing my second book. I was 80% through, and then I said, what's the point of writing a book for CDOs if no company appoints a CDO consciously? So I put this 80% book to the side and started from scratch writing a book for CEOs about the journey until you have a CDO in place. So it's the first part of the story. It's just like Star Wars when the first episodes came later, right? So and then I said, if a CEO reads that and then says, oh yeah, it makes sense. It's so important that it cannot be covered as a subset of something else. It needs to have a seat at the board level and so on. And then he will search for a CDO, and that's where my second book starts.
Wow, okay. I didn't know that. That's really interesting, because you're actually really right. Yeah, before I engage in the topic of what's a CDO and what he needs to do, make sure that there's an understanding why I need a CDO. And that is, I would say, and we will touch that definitely also in the next part of our conversation, that is still an issue or a challenge, the acceptance of a CDO. It's a little bit still, in Latin we say quo vadis, so quo vadis CDO, but I find it interesting that you were targeting actually more these CEOs to address the cultural aspect of a company, to then make sure that they can then introduce a dedicated role that then deals with data.
Yeah. Why do so many CDOs leave their job relatively quickly? They are all good people. They know how to do this. They may even know how to do the cultural thing. But if they don't get full board support, the best CDO will fail.
Yeah, interesting. So you just said it like there's a kind of pattern to see that CDOs have a tendency to maybe quit or shift quite fast to another company for different reasons, obviously. But if we talk now a little bit more generally, what has evolved over the past decade, related to the CDO role, to say basically a company does need a CDO? From your experience, what is the main reason that now we would say, oh, there should be someone?
It depends on who says we need someone. I am a bit concerned that in the course of the last couple of years, companies reduced data to analytics. This hard groundwork that is required, translating business logic into data so that it really is described in a way that actually software can be developed accordingly and fits together and different functions can work together and all of these things, that's not sexy. But if you can take data and then suddenly it makes miracles. And the first wave was when machine learning suddenly took huge volumes of data and showed that there's a correlation. We didn't need millions of rules anymore. Actually, we didn't need any rule anymore. We just took the data and looked for, basically, for correlation. So that was a big aha, oh, this is fantastic. And people could see it, could touch it. And the second big wave came when these large language models actually started to work, where people say, how is that possible? And that is great, so that data draws attention. But it comes with the risk that people think that's where data starts. And I usually say, you have these big data towers, Burj Khalifa or something, and you cannot just build the executive suite on the 215th floor. It won't stay there because of gravity, right? So you have to build something below, and even if you build everything below, it will fall over if you don't have a proper foundation. The Burj Khalifa's foundation is 50 meters deep into the ground. You don't see it. And ask somebody for a business case for a 50-meter deep foundation without a building, it simply doesn't make sense. it only makes sense together with what you do with it. That's why we need a very comprehensive data view and a view of data in conjunction with the business activities that require it.
I like what you're saying, yeah. So, because you come very straight, yeah, to the point when you say that nowadays the chief data officer is kind of understood as dealing with analytics, basically data consumption, and not the part which is creation of data, sourcing data, and making it even, yeah, having it as a fundament to then.
It's even only part of the consumption. Right? We at Boehringer, meanwhile, we talk about primary use and secondary use. Secondary use is you take millions of records from the past to think of what should we do differently in the future. Primary use is you take a record to work on the described object. You know, a customer orders something. I need to know about that customer, so I look into the master data, and that is primary use. So that is important as well. It's not only this forecast the future thing.
Yeah, I fully agree with you, because I mean, we talk about core processes here, and yeah, what many call the legacy world, and it's kind of neglected, yeah, because that's probably the part where you have all these obstacles and you need to be kind of nitty gritty and fix it, because you have a legacy world which is decades old, yeah. And I mean, I always come up with the example of, I mean, I have done a few S4 projects, and I find it always significant to see that there are even R2 data in S4 application, so ERP systems, and that shows kind of that the core processes are not understood or not dealt in the way that they should be if it comes to data. And it's like kind of, okay, just make the minimum so that the processes can work.
Yeah. Look at you know what SAP has done with S4. They introduced this concept of business partners, and this is a paradigm shift. And people said, we'll do that one day. That, you know, SAP had to come up with the customer vendor integration workaround. Companies can just, you know, make a bridge between old and new, which is a temporary thing, and companies happily accepted that, and at the same time not benefiting fully from the advantages of, you know, bringing all business partners together in a joint view. So it's just, I need to complete my project now and here, and S4 project is such a monster that you remove everything that is not essential to it. And things like proper data management belong to the things that people consider as not essential, because it has worked in the past. So why should it suddenly no longer work? It's just about getting us even better, which is a luxury that we will deal with in future.
If we stick to this example with now SAP S4, and we now look into the role of the chief data officer, what would you say is the task, yeah, of a chief data officer if it comes to a S4HANA transition or project? Because again, yeah, and I now bring an additional aspect to the table, is companies who have S4 or SAP in place, that's their core ERP system, but they might have an additional CRM system, which is then another vendor, and they have other core applications, yeah. And now business partner data, or the concept of business partner data, is dealing with it very strongly from an SAP application view, but leads, prospects, yeah, and all the others that are maybe in a CRM system, and also employee data. Your employees become also a business partner, yeah. So, and they are maybe in an HR system. So, giving that example, what would be, from your point of view, the core task of a CDO to deal with this kind of setup?
Two things, actually. As business functions always look at their functional immediate needs, the role of a CDO is to represent the entire company with regards to long-term thinking and cross-functional thinking. If the CDO doesn't add those perspectives, they will not be part of the game. A marketing department will not want to spend additional effort to just make the finance folks happy, and the other way around. If you owned the company, you would say, please do that, because if you marketing guys, if you sales guys go to a company and say, you get a certain discount if you buy more than X, that discount has to make its way into the SAP system. Otherwise, it just doesn't work. So working with different worlds, these are my engagement customers, these are my financial customers, it's just not sustainable.
It's not sustainable, and it's kind of, as you said, it's an isolated view on the customer at the end. And I find it interesting what you said, because I had today exactly that call with people from finance, and they said like, well, marketing has to stick to what we come up, because SAP dictates how in the SAP MDG business partner data is defined. And I said like, okay, do you have a definition for prospects? Do you have a definition for, do you have a common agreed definition of payment terms, for example, across your divisions, regions, and with marketing and sales? And he was quiet.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wish I was with you in that discussion, because I would have enjoyed it very much, because that is a typical discussion. And the answer is not to say, no, the marketing folks are right, or no, the finance folks are right. The idea is that we have, and we call them business parties. A business party is a party to a transaction. Somebody, or an individual or an organization that our company potentially deals with. It deals with other people or entities in a financial way, in a marketing way, in a legal way. Government is also a business party. For Boehringer, one of the most important business parties is the European Medical Association, which is neither a customer nor a vendor. We have to manage the relationship to all of these. And if we don't do that properly, but everybody does their own, it just simply doesn't work.
So what would you say is the core skill or experience that a CDO has to bring to the table these days? Yeah. I come straight to the point.
Yeah. It's just a small portion is about data. It's about you need to be a diplomat, you need to be a salesperson, you need to find win-win situations. It's not sufficient to convince people. I've had people telling me, I see your point, I understand but my boss wants me to do something different. And that's what counts to me. And as a CDO, you cannot say, don't listen to your boss, listen to me. That won't happen. You have to take an approach like, okay, what approach do we find that I benefit from and you benefit from? If you follow my direction, you can be the first to get my full support, and I make your life easier from a data perspective. Or, you have had to deal with all the data stuff on top of your normal functional activities. Isn't that a bit too much? Wouldn't it be nice if another part of the organization took care of all the data stuff, so that you can focus on your marketing, sales, finance, logistics, whatever area, and then it's easier for you, and we can design it in a way that it's best for the entire company.
What you said is, and I will highlight what you just said. I will highlight what you just said. You said basically, finance and marketing, for example, need to focus on their capability. Yeah. So the competences and skill set and capabilities that are required from their functional unit. Yeah. The same applies then to HR, to finance, and the others. And the data that they need for that is then more the task of a CDO to make sure that the data is then there, yeah, based on their understanding or requirements, to then use it. Yeah.
In principle, yes.
In principle, yeah.
The business capabilities are where it all has to start. Yeah. This is also what I have to tell the data folks. Don't think that data is the center of the universe. Yeah. It doesn't start with data and everything plays into it. Data is one of the means to make the business function successful. So they say, I want to be able to do this and that. And then the data folks say, we help you being able to do that.
It's interesting that you say that, because what I kind of lately recognize amongst data professionals that looking into the path or the trend of a CDO, what is rising is a little bit the idea of that the chief data officer is somehow to be the CEO, so chief operating officer. So basically it will shift to the CEO, because the CEO at the end is kind of making sure that operations are working and it's kind of cross-functional. So what is your gut telling you about this understanding?
Yeah, there's no fundamental right or wrong in any of the governance models in a company as far as data is concerned. It depends also a bit on the company. Yes. The more data is in the center of a company, the higher the CDO should sit. I usually say that the CEO of Meta is at the same time the CDO of Meta, because that's a core business of them, right? And in other areas, you would say, where is the biggest focus? And the biggest thing for a data officer is independence. Mm-hmm. If a chief data officer reports into the chief marketing officer, how can that be a neutral approach? Yeah. If you have to then have this battle between finance and marketing, and then as a chief data officer you say, and if I now say something in favor of finance, my boss hits me, that's really dangerous. You need the full mandate, which can either come through reporting to the CEO, sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't, or you need to report into a neutral function. I have at TNT, I worked for the CFO, which was not a bean counter or something as some of them are, but he was a kind of the financial shadow CEO. The CEO was there for strategy and marketing and market positioning, and the CFO was there to get all the numbers right across all functions. And then I had the authority to act cross-functionally. This is extremely important, that may be under the CFO, that may be under a strategic function, under corporate functions together with legal and similar functions where you have a cross-functional responsibility, as long as you have the cross-functional scope and the mandate.
I like very much what you're saying, because you highlighted already some obstacles, I think, by saying at the end, it depends really on the culture of the company and what the business model the company has. You gave the example with Meta, where the CEO is obviously also a CDO, and then you need to work cross-functional. You need to have this legitimized by the organization that the CDO is operating across all the units and divisions and so on. And you highlighted already, in a nice kind of indirect sentence, the mandate. And I agree to both of it, because again, when I look into conversations that are happening, it's a kind of, it has a tendency of, like pub conversations where you have a beer in the hand and you kind of have the two extremes, like say like, it needs to be there or it needs to be there. But at the end, it depends on the company specific circumstances. But what you agree, or what we agree, is rather that it needs to be cross-functional with a strong decision power to change then certain historically grown pattern or whatever. And what I also would like now to ask you is, because I have seen, I kind of know what you will say, but I still want to hear it from you. Because I have seen a lot of companies having the chief data officer reporting to the CFO, as you mentioned. But I have the tendency to kind of, again, if I have to choose, I would not suggest this approach. Why? Because it has more the view on the defensive data management or data strategic targets. being cost cutting, being more efficient, being more compliant, and so on. So the view for now, yeah, and you said it, like more this analytical and like data-driven decision-making approach is kind of underestimated or underrepresented. Yeah, so it's more a kind of yeah, we need it because it's a cost-saving unit rather than a business growing department. Do you, now my question, do you agree that this is a kind of risk if you place it under the supervision of a CFO?
That depends on the CFO.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah? You have those CFOs, and I've had those CFOs as well,
yeah,
that were focusing on let's ensure we get all the money together and save and blah blah blah. You have equally well, you have CFOs who say, I want a proper business case mentality in our company. I want to ensure that business cases are not used to justify my favorite project, but to find out whether it makes sense in the long term. Yeah. And if you come to such a CFO with a good data story where you say, we invest in the future, yeah, then the CFO can be the perfectly right person. You have companies like, in forestry. If a CFO in a forestry company said, I only do investments that pay off within 24 months. And then people say, oh, planting trees doesn't pay off. Yeah, so you would have a CFO that thinks long term. I've worked in the transportation company where, of course, if you buy a new plane, you don't expect that to pay off within 24 months. I'm now working in pharmaceutical industry. If we only had research people doing research on substances that become a commercial product within 24 months, we could stop research. Yeah, and the good task of a chief data officer is to show that data is a similar thing. Data is something that you invest in now and without expecting it to pay off within 24 months. And if you find the right CFO who shares that view, there's no reason why a CDO should not report into that CFO.
Okay. Now coming to the ideal scenario, okay?
Have you seen that scenario anywhere before? Have you met a company where you said they have found a good approach?
To be honest, I think there is, depending on the level of maturity of the company in regard to their data management or data analytics management, there is a different scenario which would work better. Yeah. So I have seen companies, let's say that way, I have seen companies where they had it at the beginning under the supervision of a CFO, and it was good. Why? Because IT governance was very dominant in that company. Bringing now data governance in was accepted, yeah, because IT was also under the supervision, yeah. The CIO was also under the supervision of the CFO, so they were kind of expecting or could familiarize themselves with rather this setup because they were used to it. But then it was more about the cleaning up,
the
defensive part. And then then I have seen companies where it was really offensive, understood the topic, and having it under the CFO was not succeeding at all. Yeah, the CFO was there and was honestly kind of overwhelmed by the expectations, yeah, and couldn't.
So, which reporting lines have you seen that were best suited for the offensive part of data management?
Two scenarios I have seen. One is with the chief digital officer, yeah, so that the CDO times two, yeah, kind of, because everything that was digital was also depending on data and bringing innovative new products, services, way of working. That was going hand in hand for both. So the change aspect was quite dominant, and that was working. And the other one was, and that's actually the ultimate scenario, was that the CEO made it his own job. Yeah, to say like, data is under my umbrella, I as a CEO want to lead in the change that we have to do. That's why I take it under my authority. Yeah. So that's two scenarios that I saw working. Yeah. Because no one is questioning the CEO in a way in the decision. And it has the strong mandate that you mentioned. Yeah. And that was helping. So I would say these are the two scenarios, but it comes down to what you said. Having a strong mandate and having the authority to work more horizontal in all the lines. Yeah. So that is my experience.
But if you talk about the CEO doing it on him or herself, given all the other tasks and responsibilities that such a role comes with, it would result in the CEO appointing someone to focus on. And that's where you have a perfect CDO with the right reporting line and mandate.
Exactly. And that was also a question that I had to you, is because an existing CXO taking over the CDO role, yeah, if that is something that you could recommend or would say like that is working, I mean, in regards to the CEO, you just said it, that would kind of overblow his his daily activity schedule or plan that he has to deal with. But could you imagine another CXO that could say like, I have a dual functionality here?
Yeah, I think, and these are then the CXOs that are not so widespread. You know, a chief digital officer could be an example, a chief innovation
transformation officer.
Yeah, it could be some of those, depending on how a company works, where, for example, you have somebody responsible for all the enablers of a company. Yeah, that, for example, covers data and processes as well. And, you know, internal services, where you can say, you know, the typical triangular of people and processes and data. Yeah, if there's somebody at board level who covers all of that, that usually also comes with this cross-functional long-term mandate that a CDO actually needs. So then the CDO has the mandate by virtue of the reporting line, and that would work very well.
Yeah, okay. If we have the ideal scenario and we are now in the boardroom, okay, what would you include the CDO on the top in the boardroom with all the other CX like CFO, CEO, or would you say no, the CEO as a kind of, you know, it's important, but maybe on the second grade, yeah, so it's maybe one step or one hierarchy level below the CFO, CEO. What is it? Because again, yeah, you see, and we talked about it like different scenarios. The scenario was kind of most of the time it was that the CDO is reporting to some other CXO, and then this role is representing it in the highest level. Do you think this is still an approach that we should advocate for, or it should kind of have the tendency to be replaced, or would you say no, actually it's fitting? I know you say like it depends on the company, but
it depends on the company.
But what would be the ideal?
There is no idea. To be honest, there is no ideal solution. Right? There's no ideal board composition in general. Yeah. It really depends on the company, on the market of the company, on the culture. You don't switch a culture overnight, so you have to consider the culture. So there are cases where it makes sense for a CDO to be at the board level. Absolutely. But there are other cases where it would data would just have too much of a position compared to other things, because we cannot pretend as if data is the most important thing just because we come from the data world. Yeah. There's so many other aspects, and then we can say, okay, a company that strongly focuses on totally different things and needs data as one of the enablers, then it is absolutely okay to have the representative of all the enablers sitting at the board level and having data as one of the important enablers reporting into that board member.
Mm-hmm. To challenge now a little bit what you said, have you come across that the representative in the board was always capable to communicate what the CDO is kind of saying or needing? Yeah, because you must have seen also experiences or have made experiences where it was not the case. So, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. This is a key thing. The board member, if a chief data officer is not member of the board, then the board member that the chief data officer reports to doesn't need to understand data in all details, but has to be convinced that data is one of the key drivers. So if the CDO then in his daily activity can refer to the board member backing him or herself up, that's then the key, because it's not important that you are at the highest level, but that, back to the mandate, that you have support from the highest level.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, again, as you said, and I like to provoke a little bit your concepts, So it's not about the CXO that is representing it and how it is placed or not placed. It's more about what comes with it. The mandate, the approvals that he has and the authorities that has given to them. So speaking now about exactly that, how could you make sure that you gain executive support and budget approval for leading the company to a more data-based or data-driven, whatever you prefer, company, so to the change. So what would you say should be on the kind of recipe list, or non-negotiables, let's say that way, that a CDO brings in and says like, okay, if I'm supposed to take this role, these are my non-negotiables. What would that be?
Yeah, it will be a mixture of offensive and defensive. The defensive things is, try to become GDPR compliant without data. Forget about it. We cannot be compliant we cannot even, as a pharmaceutical company, how can we submit our proposals for new medications without having our data under control, right? The medical associations, they become more digitalized as well, and they expect us to submit requests in a very digital way, which requires us to be data compliant. That's a defensive way that you have to cover. The offensive way is which opportunities do we lose? And not progressing makes you falling back because others progress. Your competitors do all of this. They use data, and not only this shiny thing that everybody does, and we can use artificial intelligence to forecast which of our molecules have which effect in which therapeutic areas and so on. That's all nice, but even the foundational work, if we don't do that, what are the costs of not doing it? This is for me a key topic. You will never turn this data foundational work into a sexy thing. It will just not work. But you can make the board think, oh shit, we'd rather do that, otherwise we are missing opportunities. And if you achieve that, you get a totally different understanding of the urgency of acting on data.
So having that said now, I mean, a lot of companies do exactly their split. They say like, we have someone who is more dedicated to the defensive part, and we have a role that is more dedicated to the offensive part, which is now a chief analytics officer, or nowadays even a chief AI officer. Do you think these conversations about now as chief analytics officer and AI officer is helping the CDO, or is it rather an obstacle that we put next to it? Because the role, I would say, the role has already issues or problems to justify its existence, and now we bring in some two other roles, and make it even more complex and say like, they're by the way, they're not only chief data officer, they're also the other two, and you need to consider them as well. Would you?
Countries that work with different roles don't do themselves a favor. It belongs together, right? It's just, if you want to ask the question, what is more important for a car, the tires or the steering wheel? The answer is none works without the other. if you ask a body, what's more important for you, the heart or the lung? You need both. You will die without either or, right? So you need to take this comprehensive approach. You need somebody who, in the area of data, balances offensive and defensive aspects, who really prioritizes within the area of data. Don't leave that to the CEO, who cannot really judge. Yeah. So this is, for me, everything else than one chief data officer being responsible for all aspects of data is one step too short.
I had to ask you this question because I think it's a very kind of, it's always in the round, and when we talk with on events to other data professions and also on social media, I always see this question, and I ask this, I'm like, are you serious? Are you really asking that question? Yeah. And at the same time, we see, like, you read a post about exactly this question: what is a CDO doing versus what is a chief analytics officer doing? And then you scroll a little bit down, and then you see CDO has failed. You know, like, kind of, we don't need a CDO anymore. And I think, like, these are two extremes again. You know, and but I'm with you. There should be one role dealing entirely with data topics, yeah, whether it is then for the offensive parts or defensive parts, whether it's more about creating some fancy AI-based or ML-based tools and services, or it is supporting really your core processes, yeah. And now, having that said, now if we look in a step below that, let's say we have a chief data officer. What operating model or governance setup, I'm speaking here of centralized, decentralized, federated, is kind of suitable for having a CDO, and which of it is actually illogical in its nature? Yeah.
Actually, there are multiple models that could work depending on the company that you're working on the size of the company. Of course, I have my favorite, and I'm happy to share it. I usually compare that with a recipe from politics.
Okay.
Yeah, I work with the subsidiarity principle. And, you know, everybody in Böhringer knows that, meanwhile, that I'm talking about it over and over again.
Yes.
The subsidiarity principle says that things should only be done centrally if they cannot be done in a distributed, in a federated model. So, you know, if imagine in the German government, the central government in Berlin had to do everything. Had to design about, you know, the financial situation in the small communes, and this simply wouldn't work, because not only are they too small, but how could they understand all the details of that local situation? So the principle is only do things centrally if you can justify it, if it is either not possible to do it locally. You know, in the data terms, if everybody defines their own glossary and defines their own data model, then it would just simply not work together, and the company departments have to work together. Or if it is simply beneficial, if you have the synergies of doing things centrally. If everybody built their own master data solutions, it would not only be incompatible, but it would become tremendously expensive. If you do things a couple of times in parallel rather than doing them once, you pay more. Yeah, so these are the criteria. And then we look at, do we set up our master data standards centrally? Yes, of course we do, because it is more efficient than if everybody sets up their own standards, and it is necessary because it all has to work together. So we need one set of standards that allow people to understand each other, to exchange data and interpret it properly, and so on and so on. But do we need to do all the machine learning centrally? No, on earth, absolutely not, because people who understand the subject of their activities, which is in the respective departments, they need to have the machine learning knowledge to use it there. So you have a lean yet strong and mandated central organization. I've always worked with very small central teams. And then you give the framework and the tools maybe to empower the local teams, which are local in the sense of country by country, location by location, but also in the sense of business function by business function, and then empower and enable them to do the things on their own. And that is why this often used term of data literacy is so important. They cannot do this if the data knowledge is kept by this elite group in the head office only. No, people out there need to understand. It is easier for a functional expert to also learn about data than for a data organization to learn all the aspects of a company. That's almost impossible. So if you find that balance, that you say, we have a few things that we do centrally, but these are fully mandated. These are law. But within that framework that we provide centrally, the business function need to have all the freedom, the flexibility. They need to be able to work quickly, which they cannot do with a central bureaucracy monster. They need to be able to act, the marketing guy says, I need the results tomorrow. I cannot request for a formal process to blah, 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 and then finally be allowed to use these systems. No, it has to happen immediately. Give them that freedom, but ensure that they all speak the same language and so on, so that they can understand each other.
Yeah, brilliantly said, I think. Yeah, it is really depending, again, yeah, I fully agree with you, saying like centralize what needs to be centralized and decentralize what is then also. I'm always saying like, why do you want to do all the job? Yeah, all the work. Let them do the work. You provide them, yeah, you facilitate and you provide them with methods, techniques, standards, role model, communication models, learning, data education programs, so that we make sure that everyone is data literate in the same way and so on. But then let them define the data, let them define the data quality rules and so on. Yeah.
Just we're having that at Boehringer right now. Who is the person best to be able to judge at which temperature a certain substance degrades? Yeah. Is it a data person or is it a biologist? I wouldn't dare say what the right temperature condition is. I leave that to the person that are familiar with the natural behaviors of a substance. Yeah. And that's how it has to be. That's why we now do this, the data structure. How to translate that into data structure. That we can do that centrally. We need to have one data model that is without any contradictions. But the data content owners will hardly ever be central data people. Yeah. It's the people out there who know best.